The birth of Jesus. In the month of March in the year 8 BC, the same month that Joseph and Mary were married, Emperor Augustus decreed that all the inhabitants of the Roman Empire should be counted for the purpose of more effective taxation. The Jews had always been strongly opposed to any attempt to count the people, causing the census in the Jewish kingdom being postponed for a year. Throughout the Roman Empire, this census was recorded in the year 8 BC, except in the Jewish kingdom of Herod, where it took place a year later in 7 BC. Genetically, Joseph was not from the lineage of King David. 6 generations earlier, an ancestor had been orphaned at a young age and was adopted by a certain Zadok, who raised him as his own son. Zadok was, however, a direct descendant of King David. Because of this, Joseph's family line was also counted as part of the house of David. Hence, Joseph had to travel to Bethlehem, the city of David, to be registered for the Roman census. There was no need for Mary to go with him to Bethlehem, as Joseph was authorized to have his family enrolled. But Mary insisted on accompanying him. She was afraid to stay alone since the child might come into the world, and since Bethlehem was not far from the city of Judah. Mary also foresaw the possibility that she could make a pleasant visit to Elizabeth to see little John. Joseph more or less forbade Mary to accompany him, but that did not help. When she packed the food for the journey of 3 to 4 days, she prepared double quantities and she also prepared herself for the trip. Before they actually set out, Joseph was already reconciled to Mary's choice to go with him, and excitedly they left Nazareth at daybreak. And so, early on the morning of August 18 in the year 7 BC, this Jewish couple set out for Bethlehem. They had a donkey on which the heavily pregnant Mary sat for most of the journey, while Joseph accompanied this beast of burden. For the most part, they followed the road along the Jordan River, and it took them 2.5 days to reach Bethlehem, where they arrived on the afternoon of August 20th. The inn was overcrowded, so Joseph sought shelter with distant relatives, but because of the census, every room in Bethlehem was full. When he returned to the courtyard of the inn, he learned that a caravan stable, carved out of the rocky slope, had been cleared and cleaned to accommodate more guests. Joseph left the donkey in the courtyard, and with Mary descended the stone steps to this shelter. They saw that tent curtains had been hung and congratulated themselves on having found such comfortable lodging. Joseph planned to go out immediately to be registered, but Mary was tired. She was thoroughly upset and begged him to stay with her, and so he did. All that night Mary was restless, and by daybreak the labor began. Around noon on August 21st in the year 7 BC, Mary gave birth to her son. She was assisted by kind, helpful women who had also found shelter at the inn. Jesus was born in the animal shelter of the inn. He was wrapped in cloths that Mary had brought and placed in a feeding trough. Jesus was an ordinary baby. There was nothing special about him. Indeed, that afternoon seraphim sang their songs of praise over the stable in Bethlehem, but these songs of praise were not heard by human ears. No shepherds or other mortals came to welcome the child. The day after Jesus' birth, Joseph registered himself. He also discovered that a room in the inn was becoming vacant, and that same afternoon they moved out of the animal shelter and into the inn. Here they stayed for almost 3 weeks until they were given shelter at the home of a distant relative of Joseph's. The second day after Jesus' birth, Mary informed Elizabeth that her child had been born. On his return, the messenger informed her that Joseph was invited to come to Jerusalem to discuss all their affairs with Zechariah. The following week, Joseph went to Jerusalem to consult with Zechariah. Zechariah and Elizabeth had both become deeply convinced that Jesus would become the promised Jewish Savior, the Messiah, and that their son John would become his preordained right-hand man. Since Mary felt the same way, it was not difficult to persuade Joseph to stay in Bethlehem. For what could be a better place for the Messiah to grow up than in the city of David? For this reason they decided to stay in Bethlehem, where Joseph sometimes worked as a carpenter. On the 8th day, Jesus was circumcised according to Jewish custom and was officially named Joshua. When Jesus was 3 weeks old and when they had just moved from the inn to a small house, they suddenly received a curious visit from 3 priests from Mesopotamia. These religious foreigners were looking for the child of light. One of them had a dream some time before in which he had been informed that the light of life was about to appear on earth as a baby among the Jews. The dream had been so true to life that this truth seeker, together with 2 fellow believers, had set out on a journey to Judea to seek the light of life. After searching in vain for many weeks, they were finally in Jerusalem about to return to Mesopotamia, when Zechariah met them and revealed to them that he believed Jesus was the goal of their search. He sent them to Bethlehem where they found the baby and left their gifts with Mary, his earthly mother. These wise men did not see a star that led them to Bethlehem. The beautiful legend of the Star of Bethlehem comes from Eastern mythology. The religions of the Persian peoples contain many such stories. When printing presses did not exist and people passed on most of their knowledge orally, the message was often wrapped up in a beautiful story so it could be easily passed on.